Power Lunch. I'm Byron Kennedy. Next up, we're going to be focusing on a company called Kiwara PLC. It's the second of the week that's listed in London. It's decided to take on the JSE as a second home. The other was on Monday. We saw Diamond Corp come to the JSE. Vivian-Neal is the Chief Executive Officer of Kiwara. And if you were doing an elevator pitch, you had 30 seconds between floors and someone said, "What does Kiwara do?" What would you tell them?
Mining exploration in Zambia, focused on base metals with uranium, early stage but with considerable potential.
Well, that was less than 30 seconds. Well done. We'll get into the detail in just a moment. But what prompted the decision to seek a secondary listing in South Africa?
Well, we are based within SADC, and we see the JSE going through a renaissance. I mean, it was in its previous heyday the exchange to list on. It's now in renaissance. We see it attracting inward investments such as ourselves, and we see with the relaxation of exchange controls greater benefit, and really all of that drives to the fact that we get direct access to the sophisticated, experienced South African investment community.
Yeah, you talk about the JSE in its heyday. I think the gold miners were listed by province in terms of sectors on the JSE. A very different story today, but the appetite for stocks of this nature, like Kiwara, is it dried up in London that we've seen quite a few of these come to the JSE looking for support in South Africa?
I don't think it's dried up. I think that AIM has its own problems. I mean, it is very much the second exchange. Many, such as the JSE, don't even see it as a proper listing, which in fact why the JSE is really legally our primary listing, because that is the obligations that we have to meet from corporate governance and management. And AIM, although we were there first, we follows on from that. But I think that as a Southern African-based operation, this is the logical place to be. And with the recent changes, it seemed the right time to come here.
Just having a look at trade to your stock in the first 2 hours, there hadn't been any. Had you expected a warmer reception?
No, not at all. This is very much an introduction. The stock is tightly held. We only listed on AIM or completed the reverse takeover at the beginning of August last year. Some 74% of the stock is held by management under lock-in agreements. A further 16 or 17% is held by two strategic investors, so there's very little liquidity. And obviously one of the things that we will do here is to increase that liquidity.
How would you do that? Because obviously it's pointless having a listing here if it's so tightly held.
Absolutely, through fundraising at the appropriate time.
Fundraising. Just how fully funded are you? How much have you got in the bank to last you over the next while?
We have sufficient to carry out the work that we stated we would do to the JSE in our competent persons report, taking us through the year. We have about 2.2 million in the treasury sterling, and the work will be reviewed based on results. And if we continue to get positive results that suggest that there's a bigger target than we anticipated, then obviously we will expand the work because we have a timeline on commitments to meet, and we'll seek to raise additional money to fund that.
The major projects, those are Kabombo and Kiwara. Let's start off with what seems to be the most significant of the two. If you look at your website, certainly it's Kabombo. How extensively has that been drilled, and what do you think the prognosis is?
Kabombo is a target that's been known for over 50 years. It was originally found by RST, Roan Selection Trust, in the 1940s. They drilled it reasonably extensively in the 1960s, 31 holes, but focusing on nickel. Anglo then took it on in the mid-90s, and were there until they pulled out of Zambia in 2002. They were looking, all of that work related to nickel in a very small zone, 800 meters from a port, and there were historic resource figures produced for that. But at the same time, they determined that the actual strike length of the deposit was 11 kilometers. We've actually extended that further. And all the holes they drilled in that strike looking for nickel reported copper. We are now following that up as it has up-dip potential, whereas the nickel appears to us to still be deep-seated. So from a small mining company's point of view, we see near-surface potential, and that's what we're following up.
Yeah, on your website, you admit to there being the previous exploration work at Kabombo, but you say that you should still be classified as an early-stage exploration company. Clearly, you're not satisfied with the processes from the past and the technology. So has that changed a lot? That might change some of the readings from the past?
No, I mean, at the end of the day, the only way you find out what is in a potential mine is drilling a hole in it. No sophisticated, non-penetrative device will actually tell you. And so it is down to drilling and it is down to assays. Our assays compared with the RST assays seem to be constant, so that's encouraging. So we will be able to use their data, and indeed we have access to their core. So that's like inheriting 31 holes. But the historic work was very much focused on nickel over a very small area. We're looking at 11 kilometers, and there was very little work done in that 11 kilometers. So that is why we're treating it as with a fresh approach.
Mining licenses on the African continent have come under the spotlight in recent times. We've got to ask you, because some governments are starting to change their tune. The license 267 covers a 5,500 square kilometer area around the Kabombo Dam. There we go. You're more familiar with it than I am. But how did you get it?
We did a joint venture with a local company, LM Engineering, who held it for a year and a half before we joint ventured with them. We convinced them that we were serious, that we had the funds and we had the expertise to actually do something with this. And we entered into a joint venture in the end of 2006, which I believe has gone well for them. We managed the project. We've increased our ownership of the joint venture company, and through doing that, we brought the chairman of our local joint venture partner onto the main board, Honourable Severin Castaneni, and I think he is hugely helpful to us in understanding what is going on. The license system has, as you say, been reviewed. It is now on a 2-year renewal basis, and on each renewal you have to drop 50%. So the pressure is on exploration companies to identify what they want and use it, or use it.
It's held by a joint venture. Why was it structured like that, the license, and what are the risks?
The joint venture, well, when we started the joint venture, the license was already held by LM Engineering. So the joint venture was structured that we would manage their interest and the joint venture itself would have the beneficial interest. On the renewal, the license itself was transferred into the joint venture company. I think the risks are we have to perform and deliver and convince the government that we are using the license area and doing what we set out to do. And we have to report that, obviously, and we have to expect to drop half of it on each 2-year cycle.
We have to touch on Kiwara before we leave. Just how significant is that in the whole Kiwara mix, or is it too soon to tell?
I think it is significant because it historically was a significant uranium target, and we are in the process of rebuilding the data set on it. We have done some drilling. We're waiting. Those assays are much more difficult to do than base metals. We're waiting those assays imminently, and that and the remodeling based on the drilling we did last year will help us decide what we should do this year. You've already talked about the mix of uranium and base metals, and I agree with what's just been said. We can't make that decision now because we don't know if base metals and uranium are going to be together or separated geographically. And when we do, we'll make the appropriate decision.
Peter Vivian-Neal he's the Chief Executive Officer of Kiwara. It's a secondary listing on the JSE that came through today, and for an exploration company, it's not too often that they report profits, but at the interim stage to the end of September last year, they did report a small profit in the order of 3.5 million rand. Right, that's it from Power Lunch in association with MoneyWeb. We're crossing now to CNBC US for US Squawk Box, and CNBC Africa will be back 4 p.m. Central African Time with Regional Roundup.